Hello class, my name is Robert Jones, and I hope everybody's enjoying their little vacation and has a great Thanksgiving. I would also like to thank you for tuning into my PowerPoint presentation. And throughout this PowerPoint presentation, I will be talking about one of the greatest mathematicians to ever live, and that would be Robert Lee Moore. Robert Lee Moore's methods and studies are still used to this day and are still very effective and used by other universities as we speak. Throughout this PowerPoint presentation, I will be talking about Robert Lee Moore's life, his study with topology, and what he's most known for, which would be the Moore method. Now, as you can see, I have a picture up of Robert Lee Moore. It's a younger picture, but it's the only good picture I could see or find that actually showed his entire face, believe it or not. Okay, let's talk a little bit about Robert Lee Moore. Okay. A little bit about Robert Lee Moore. He was born in Dallas, Texas, November 14th, 1882. He had 5 brothers and sisters. And he was a very smart young man. He actually entered the University of Texas at age 16, which is absolutely incredible. He actually, by this age, also self-taught himself calculus, which is just tremendous. I mean, I can't get calculus to this day. He received his Bachelor's of Science in only 3 years at the University of Texas, which is just tremendous because it usually takes people 4 to 5 years to receive their Bachelor's in Science. So as you could tell, Robert Lee Moore was definitely a bright and smart man for his age. Okay? Let's talk a little bit more about Robert Lee Moore. He then, after he graduated from the University of Texas and received his Bachelor in Science, he then received a scholarship to the University of Chicago because of all his achievement and success at the University of Texas. Robert Lee Moore ended up taking it, and he then received his doctorate in geometry from the University of Chicago, which is just huge. Robert Lee Moore is an American mathematician. He is obviously, like I said earlier, well known for his work in general topology and the Moore method because of his unusual teaching styles. Robert Lee Moore is a supporter of the American Math Society, and in 1931 he was actually elected to the National Academy of Science. Okay, I'm going to talk to you now a little bit about Robert Lee Moore's studies with general topology, because most of his career is actually based on his studies with general topology. Moore has published 67 papers and 1 monograph. The monograph was actually done in 1932 and was called The Foundations Point Set Theory on Topology. Moore actually wrote his PhD thesis on topology, so you know that he really did base his career on topology, because throughout college that's what he based most of his career on. Moore ended up writing 17 papers on point set topology, a term that he later coined. He did that because he spent so much time on the topic and doing so much work on it that he thought, why not? I figured this out so much that I figured like this should be my term. The Moore plan, Moore road space, Moore space, and the Moore space conjectured are actually named in his honor because of his work with topology. Now we're going to move on and talk a little bit more about what he is most famous for, and that would be the Moore method. The Moore method came about because of Moore's unusual teaching style. The content of his courses usually were presented in whole by students themselves. Moore believed that the students were better off learning the subject their own than him sitting there and telling them to read out of the book or put notes on the board. Which leads me to the next thing. Instead of using a textbook, students are given theorems by Robert Lee Moore, in which they have to prove and present in front of the class themselves. Okay. The Moore method advocates point to a depth of understanding that listening to lectures cannot give. Moore believed that lectures just bored students, and students would lose interest in the topic at hand. So Moore believed what better way than to get the students involved and have them go up there and solve problems themselves and have the help of other students help them solve those problems. Okay, a little bit more about the Moore method. 13 universities still use the Moore method to this day, which is really well. I think a lot more universities should use this method because I feel like students should be more hands-on when learning a subject. I know it's easier when I have my own ways of learning it rather than somebody else's. So I think that this method definitely should be used in other teachings at other universities, and even in high schools or maybe even elementary schools, to get the kids more involved. As far for the Moore method, if a student ever had trouble with a problem, Moore would never answer it for them. He would just give them hints or tips to help the student answer the question. He believed that they should figure it out for themselves rather than himself giving them the answers. This would better help them with learning the material. Okay. And lastly, an example of the Moore method. A day in Robert Moore's class usually went like this. He would first, when the class started, call a student up to the chalkboard to solve a problem, and if he or she had any trouble with the problem, then the other students were in charge of helping them point out the mistakes to help the student figure out the problem. And like I said before, he would, if nobody could answer the problem, Robert Lee Moore would just give them hints or tips to try to help them get to the part of the problem to figure out the problem and answer it themselves. He would never do it himself. Robert Lee Moore definitely was one of the greatest mathematicians to ever live. I feel like he definitely left his mark on mathematics to this day, especially with the Moore method, which I still think should be used more often in colleges and other classes. And Robert Lee Moore was definitely a smart individual and did a lot for mathematics. Well, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. And I hope you also would appreciate the work that Robert Lee Moore has done. And once again, I hope everybody has a great Thanksgiving, and thank you for listening. Have a good one. We'll see you.